video, we're going to look at the logic behind how all these applications actually work for us to understand what we're actually doing. But before we can do that, we're going to look at a basic example for us to understand how all these guys actually work. So the first step I'm going to do is to create a function, because this button is what I'm basically going to use to explain the logic that is actually going on within here and how we can use it to render higher, I can say more complex things or more complex applications with this. So the first one I'm going to do, I want to store this entry in a variable. You can say entry of this entry, and for this of our button here, let me say btn. So this of our button, this label, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But what I want to do is to move it up, then put this grid and set the row to be 0. Let me set the row to be 0 and that of column to be, let's say, something like 3. I also want to set all these guys to be 3 too, because it's moving far to the right hand side. So I want it to come a little bit closer to the center. So if I were to run this, let's see our output. You can see it tends to move to the left hand side a little bit. Here is the entry and here is the button. So the next thing we're going to do is to do an example. Like I said, I want to move this label up because we're going to focus more on this entry and this of our button. So what is the next thing that we're going to do here? I want to create a function that print out anything that will enter on that entry space. So let me run this for example. When I come here and I enter something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing is actually happening. No matter how I hit enter, nothing is actually happening. But I want us to apply kind of a basic logic for us to see what is going to happen. Let's say in a scenario, maybe I have a function that let's say I call it test. That's the just name I gave it. It doesn't really do much. And there's something called dot. We can actually get the value that is in our, can say value that is being entered in this entry, because the value that is being, let me put pass here. Let me run this again to us to see what is actually going to happen. When I entered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's nothing really happened here because we didn't get any output on our screen, because we didn't actually get what is being stored here. Because for us to make use of what is being stored here, we need to actually get it out. And how can we do that? Using by the name of the variable used to store the entry, you want to put dot get. So let's try this. Here is going to be dot what? We put it like something we entered in this entries entry guy, or I can say entry class. Anything we entered on that entry space is going to be stored inside of this guy, so we can make use of it and do what we want to do. But I want it to be stored inside of this our function that we want to create. But if I was to put it inside there, it's not going to do anything. But let me just put it inside there. It's still not going to do anything. This entry is referring to this entry that is here. So I don't need to call the global entry. Since it's already entry that is currently available, I can come here and say the var entry, but I'll go a little bit complicated with this. So next I want us to look at, since now this guy is now if I was to print this. So what is definitely going to happen here is that anything I entered on this of our entry here is going to be stored inside here. This dot get is going to get it, and there's going to be printed out on our screen for us. So let's run it. Even though as of now, we're not going to get anything displayed for us. So let's run this. Okay, let me drag this here. Let me enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and hit enter. I can see nothing is going on here. For this things, for us to get an output on our screen, we need to logically think of a way to make this thing to be on our screen. Since, okay, how we can do this is call this function. Okay, let's try calling this function. Let's see what is going to happen. Let's call the function, which is going to testing. So let's run it again. You can see non-type object does not have any attribute. Do this is to kind of think of a way to what can we do here for this of our output to be displayed for us on our screen. What can we do for this output to display for us on our screen? How we can do this to use this button. Anytime we click on that button, we want the output to be displayed. Like I remember I told you when we talked about this button that it takes what is called command, and that command takes what is called a function. And that function, when you click on the button, that command is going to call that function to happen. So let's give it the parameter. Say command, just basically command. Here we're going to give it the name of the function that we want to. Anytime we click on this button, we want this function to happen, and in situation we want this testing to happen. So let me just copy this person and then put it here. You can type it, but I see the end of me typing when I can just copy it down here. So this is what is basically going to happen. But let's just run it and see what is going to happen. In this kind of scenario, the output is going to be generated and be displayed on our cursor down here on this of our terminal. So let's run it. Okay, let me bring it here. Let me enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then what happened when I hit the button? Let's look down on our terminal. Let's see what's going to happen. You can see. So as you can see here, we have something like a non-type object has no attribute again. This is because when we call this entry, that is this guy, we'll just assign this grid directly to it. For us to be able to not to be having this kind of output for us, so we need to bring this, call this entry variables, and then we'll call the grid on it. The grid, you can say the grid method or the function on it. So we can, instead of us writing it after this entry here, which is a bad practice to do in the first place. So we can just call it here. And then this entry, call this variable, and then we're going to move this guy down here. And we should also do similar thing to this of our BTN. Instead of writing it directly here, so it's a good idea where we'll move it to the, unless in a situation whereby we don't want to make use of what is going on. Just come here, put it. Sorry, let me just copy this directly. Doing it in this way is the best practice to handle this kind of things. Here, what is going to happen is that we created a variable that holds this of our entry. I will we'll display this of our entry on our application. So the next thing we did was to we created a function here, this testing, and this testing is going to get what we entered inside this of our entry box here, or entry space. And then what is going to happen when we press this button? It's going to run this function, which is testing. It's going to run it, and when it's running, what is it going to display for? It's going to display what we inputted, because what we inputted is what's going to be get by this entry door gets. So let's close this and then let's run this guy. Okay, what we did here is not different from what we did earlier. So let me enter 1, 2, 3, 4, and then click on this. But if I were to hit input, enter, it's not going to do it. What I have to do is to press on this button. You can see I start to get my output down here. If I were to hit it again, I keep on getting the same output. If I change it to something like increase the number or anything, the output changes. You can put easy kits, for example, or anything of your choice. You can see I get easy keys as an output down here, because this function help us to this button help us to run this function. There are many ways we can run this function for us to get the output, but button tend to do a great job. Remember what I said, there are three basically main things you should have on your mind when you want to use Tkinter or most of other GUI libraries. First one is the label, second one is the entry, and the third one is the button. With knowing these three guys really well, it separates you from that of a beginner. If you know how to make use of these three guys, you have done a pretty job in many ways. So this is just basically what I want to look at in the video. Next, we are going to do a whole kind of a more complex and then explain this guy what is actually here really well. So I'll be able to see in the next video. Thank you for watching.